Kia ora, and welcome to another Filament Fast 5 book review. Last time I spoke to you, I was in Kyoto and very much at the tail end of the Japanese blossom season as they were moving in the Northern Hemisphere from their winter into their spring and well on the way to their summer. Of course, returning here to Auckland, we're really in the movement the other way. As we head into winter. So I thought it was really appropriate to share with you a wonderful book by the British author Katherine May called Wintering, How I Learned to Flourish When Life Became Frozen. Here's a copy of the book. This is a wonderful book and it is written on the premise that when it comes to the seasons and experiences of our own lives, we can all have moments where we winter. So not only is it a seasonal occurrence, but it's also a moment in our own lives and several moments in our own lives when you can feel disconnected from the world, the workplace, kind of why you think you're actually doing what you're doing. And it can also just be a fallow patch in your life when things aren't really clicking and you feel a bit stuck. But the premise of the book is that by looking at nature, by learning from cultures that actually take wintering really seriously, there are ways we can adapt so that we can take those moments in our stride, because they are going to come, and we can actually get through them stronger. So 5 big takeouts for me. First of all, Katherine explores this idea repeatedly that our Western notion of time being linear is actually very misleading. We sort of know from nature and the change of the seasons that time is actually cyclical. Many religions and many philosophies have sort of remind us of that fact. And in fact, when it comes to business, although we're always on linear deadlines and linear kind of project plans, we talk about business cycles, we talk about economic cycles. So that idea of the cyclical nature of time is there. Of course, in a post-industrialized world, for about 200 years, we've been really geared towards time as linear. And so office-bound, screen-bound, we're sort of overexposed to light and we get very hemmed in. And that doesn't actually suit our very human systems that work on rhythms and they work on cycles. Second point, she talks about the fact that for nature and animals, winter is actually part of the job of surviving and living and indeed thriving. So if progress is cyclical rather than linear, then the ebbs and flows of life are actually part of the job. Winter is part of the job. I do love that phrase. And so we shouldn't fight that, but we should actually accept that those ebbs and flows come and go, and they can be made more manageable if we actually prepare for it. Third point she makes is she introduces this concept called talvitilat, which is a Finnish idea. So the Finns have to deal with a really extreme winter every year, as do many of the Nordic countries. And that talvitilat actually is a concept that means stowing away for winter. And of course, it means all the things you do practically in a cold atmosphere, like sort out the house and make sure the roof isn't leaking so that when the snows come you don't get caught out. But psychologically it's also a really helpful concept. How can we make changes to set new habits and behaviors and new routines to get you through a long winter when daylight is in shorter supply and the days are shorter? How do you adjust your diet, your routine, your exercise, your pastimes, your work rituals? These are things that we can leave unaddressed and they can catch us out. Fourth idea is this idea when we inevitably do suffer from bouts of insomnia, as we do as humans when things are on our minds. Katherine talks about this idea of turning insomnia into your own watch. So the watch is a pre-industrial idea when before people worked in factories and they used to be very agricultural in the work that they did, people divided their time in the night into 2 phases of sleep, 3 to 4 hours. When they went to bed at dusk because there was no electricity, and then they awoke for an hour in the middle of the night, and at this time they called the watch. And during this time they chatted, they socialized, they visited neighbors, they pursued a craft, and so this lovely idea of if you do wake in the night, turning that into productive time, not sitting there tossing and turning trying to fight that lack of sleep, but actually the ability to get up and try and do something productive with that time. So those are the 4 big takeouts. The 5th big takeout is this idea of segmenting the time in the year to make it more manageable psychologically. So bear with me on this one. We're going to talk about druids. Who doesn't want to talk about druids? Druids have a way of thinking about the year that's actually broken into 8 segments. They call it the 8-fold wheel of the year. And that means that they have a celebration that either marks a solstice or an equinox or a moment in the seasonal change of the year every 6 to 8 weeks. And psychologically, that makes the year way more manageable. It breaks down that huge expanse of 52 weeks. And it's something in the modern secular world that we sort of suffer from, because between Christmas, maybe a bit of Easter and the odd long weekend, we don't really have that mental structure. And I think that's why things like Matariki coming back as a festival in our midwinter are so important. And I guess she encourages us all to think about how can we take our time and make sure we've always got moments of significance to anticipate and look forward to, even in the darkest days. So look, Wintering is a beautiful read. Katherine May writes wonderfully. It's very candid, it's very open. And, you know, with this particular book, you're not necessarily looking for those punchy kind of takeaways like you do in some business books. This is actually a kind of a much more reflective book. But I do urge you, if you're feeling like you're in a fallow patch, or you're getting to that point in April, May, where all those great intentions have that energy has started to go, this is a great book to read, if only to take some pressure off yourself and to perhaps rethink some of your attitudes to the next 6 months that we need to get through. Katherine also has a great podcast called How We Live Now, and I'd encourage you to look for that in Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. She's a really thoughtful commentator, and she's also just brought out a new book called Enchantment. So look, I'd love to know your thoughts, and speak to you soon. Matewa.